Hi, my name's Dr. Karen Ingham, and I'm an artist, a designer, a writer, and I'm currently also a reader in art, science and technology interactions at Swansea Metropolitan University. The kind of route that I'm on now really began in earnest about 10 years ago. I did a piece of work as part of a Master of Philosophy degree with the University of Wales. That piece of work was called Death's Witness, and I was very fortunate to get permission from the hospital to collaborate with them. So that was my introduction, if you like, to the kind of technology and the potential, the creative potential of the technology within biomedicine was with the MRI machine, which, as we know, has now become almost de rigueur as a sort of artistic tool for artists exploring biomedical discourse in the body. I worked with many theatres of anatomy across Europe, and I worked with various anatomists and bioscientists, and that was the production of a touring exhibition and a book, and it embedded a series of networks and relationships that I'm still involved in now and that continue to grow. And I think that's one of the really important things about working across art, science and technology is the embedding of those relationships and the building on them. The Hunterian Museum at London's Royal College of Surgeons is home to the anatomical collection of 18th century surgeon anatomist John Hunter. Here in the beautifully lit space of the Crystal Gallery are row upon row of preserved anatomical objects. But these objects were once subjects. Numbers once names. All the dead voices, what do they say? So the focus of my research, my practice, my interest is to bring back together, if you like, to reinvigorate some of these historical relationships that have become somewhat redundant now, these discourses between art, science and technology. I use all of these terms in a very broad way. So when I say science, I mean the sciences, although I tend to work predominantly with the biological sciences. I also work with botany and more recently with entomology with a project I'll mention in a bit called Pollinator Frogs. Again, the arts are in themselves very broad, and some of the work I do involves writing, it involves aspects of academia, as well as design, lens-based arts, photography. And I think that's part of the richness of these dialogues. Now, the kind of equipment that I was able to use then, I would never normally have access to. So I was using electron scanning confocal microscopy. Now, what this allows biologists to do is to create, if you like, a layered portrait down through the functioning brain, very much like an fMRI scan, but a functioning fMRI is functional magnetic resonance imaging. And what all of these technologies do is allow us to get close to a model that approximates the working, living, thinking brain. So this actually introduces a whole new area, and it's obviously very attractive to artists to be involved in that technology. For the scientists, what the artists can do in that environment is to provoke different questions. All right, so it takes the scientist outside of their normal model or mode of thinking. So the artist will provoke, if you like, a different kind of approach. I mean, in one sense you could say, well, that's a bit useless because it doesn't lead to any great medical insights. But if we look at the whole spectrum of these relationships, what it's really about is creativity and innovation. So if you can spark creativity and innovation, whether it comes from the scientist, the artist, or that dialogue between the two, then that's positive, that's a positive product of that kind of dialogue. One of the things that concerned me a little bit was within these relationships of art and science, the kind of the technology and the genuine collaboration and the innovation was often missing. Too often these outputs, if you like, the end result did end up in a gallery. Around 2008, I put forward the idea through the university, so through Swansea Metropolitan University, where I was working as a reader and as a lecturer. I put forward the idea of a network called SATnet. SATnet is the Science Arts Technology Network, and the idea behind it was to create a more formal kind of framework for these relationships, but one that actually embraced more, if you like, that not just the technology and innovation aspects, but actually started to blur these boundaries, which again are artificial boundaries historically, between what we might call the fine and applied arts. And that's really, really important to me. So whereas you might historically get someone who's called a ceramicist or a fashion designer, and here you'll get the conceptual artist, in a way, when it comes to creativity and innovation and thinking, that doesn't matter. Those boundaries really are artificial boundaries. And so what SATnet for me was really about was bringing all of these aspects together. And as it's morphed and as it's changed, it's brought business more on board, and it's been looking, if you like, at a broader social nexus, a broader kind of social model within Wales in this instance, of how art, technology, science and creativity can work together. And I think that's very, very important. One of the other things about the SATnet model I think has been very useful is that it's brought different universities together. And again, although we know there's a rich tradition of universities collaborating, it isn't something that's been necessarily that strong in Wales. And I think SATnet's played a very positive role in encouraging that cross-academia collaboration, sometimes with and through business, if you like. So an example of this is Pollinator Frocks, which is a project I mentioned earlier. Pollinator Frocks, which I realise is a slightly strange named subject, is actually a series of prototype fabrics and clothing designed to attract endangered pollinating insects. And it represents, if you like, a kind of engagement with environmental issues, particularly the plight of the pollinators. So we may be aware of the bee. The plight of the bee is something now that's had a lot of publicity. But the bee is only one of many winged pollinators, insect pollinators, that are endangered. They're endangered because of aggressive farming practices, poor land management, urban development, use of pesticides. In the case of the bee, the varroa mites or parasitic infections. There's a whole range of issues affecting the pollinators. One of them is that the plants on which they depend, so their host plants or the plants where they have a mutual relationship, the plants themselves are endangered. And they're endangered again because we have less and less meadow, we have less and less wild areas. And plants that we consider to be weeds often, wildflowers, dandelion for example, they're actually very important plants in the pollination cycle. So it's a very complex ecological issue, and Pollinator Frocks is about eco-fashion. It's wearable technology, wearable designs that bring to the public these issues. It's like wearing the art, it's wearing the science. So each Pollinator Frock, in fact, is a little kind of mini natural history lesson or a mini science lesson about a particular pollinating insect with its host plant. And one of the ways I wanted to make this very vivid and very unusual was to really emphasize the role of pollen itself. And so I've worked with microscopists at Swansea University to create enlarged pollen grains under, again, an electron scanning microscopy unit with a cryogenic chamber. Now this is fantastic because it means you can make absolutely beautiful structures of the pollen and then incorporate that into the design. I've also worked with the Welsh Centre for Printing and Coating at Swansea University. They've been trialling with me the idea that we could maybe coat the fabrics with a nectar-like substitute, so sucrose, fructose and xanthan gum as a binder, and that maybe by putting these coatings on the clothes that the insects would get a little feed when they come to them. So it's not that the insects are pollinating anything, but the insects, in order to pollinate, need to be fed. So if their traditional food sources are endangered, the idea is you give them this little feed, it gives them the energy to go out and pollinate, and that's kind of what the public engagement aspect is about. I've recently been trialling this in New Zealand as part of a big event there called SCANS. And SCANS is New Zealand's premier art, science, technology and environment event. It happens every 2 years. And it was great while I was over there because I did a lot of public engagement. I took the Pollinator Frocks on video walkabout, uploaded them to YouTube. And while I was there, quite surprisingly, it was picked up by the press, at least surprising to me because I didn't know much about it till I got back to the UK. And there's been quite a lot of interest in the Pollinator Frocks. And I think that's because it's touched a chord. And it's a way of using design, art, science, technology in a way that the public understand, because the public love design. You can speak to people about quite important issues through design, because what really this project is about, like all of my other projects really, it's about that interaction, that collaboration and that innovation that these relationships can bring. So it's a new way of thinking, a new way of looking, a new way of applying ideas that has a broader meaning, not just within the arts and the sciences, but within the public realm as well. Where the Pollinator Frocks project is now is I'm having to look quite carefully at how these this wearable science, if you like, can be taken forward. One of the things I've realised is, while it's fantastic in terms of the public engagement, you know, to have frocks that may attract insects, and there has been some interaction with butterflies and with bees, you can't really actually put these in the public domain and, say, sell them without it having a possible detrimental effect. In other words, if you buy one of these, you don't want to be wearing it and get stung by a bee. So I'm not going to use the coatings if and when these products go into sale. And if they go into sales, what I want to do is I want to use a very large portion of the money from any sales to go towards the charities that are working on the pollination issues. So charities like Bug Life, Plant Life, specialist organisations and charities that are working on these issues. I think that's probably the best way to affect real change here, is by raising money that can help them do their job. Hopefully we can develop an offshoot from this public engagement project that can be taken forward into different areas. We're hoping to do a catwalk show in London, possibly the Science Museum, possibly the Grant Museum of Zoology. So there's a lot more things planned for pollinator frocks, and it's a space that you kind of, what do they say, watch this space, I think.